What if I told you that there was a player coming out of college who was breaking records at his position? He took the bar so high that in the almost half a decade since he's left college, no one's even gotten close. And not just that, he was not drafted, brought in to pretty much be a camp leg, beat out an all-pro in front of him, and then had one of the most unprecedentedly good rookie seasons at his position of all time, breaking 80-year-old records, had another incredible season the next year, but in his third year would get cut. You would say, dang, that's a pretty disrespected player. And I'd have to agree, and in fact I might take it to a further level and say that there has never been a player more disrespected than Ryan Stonehouse. But to understand why he might be the most disrespected player in NFL history, we've got to go back, because the disrespect started honestly very, very early for Ryan. Coming out of high school, Stonehouse was already a punting phenom. Now, if you don't know what you're looking for, I could see you asking yourself, how did teams pass on this guy at all? I mean, he was consistent, he had a big-time leg, and most importantly, he was considered by one of the nation's largest kicking ranking camps to be a top 10 prospect in a year that was absolutely stacked. But to give at least a minor amount of credit to college coaches, there were some things for Stonehouse that we hadn't really seen before. First, he is undersized, as well as having a very unconventional style with his hand under the ball for the hold instead of on top, back, or the side, which was the current punting meta. But even then, his only offers were a pair of preferred walk-ons to CSU and Cal, and a scholarship opportunity from Wyoming and Cornell, which, for a player of his caliber, was a severe under-recruitment. But regardless, when he got to CSU, he played 5 seasons thanks to an untimely bout of COVID hitting the country, and my god, what does he do except set the bar so high, it's probably never going to be broken. I'm talking about having one of the best careers of all time with a gross punting stat of him averaging 47.8 yards per punt across 5 years at Colorado State, which is almost half a yard above anybody else. Now, while you may think to yourself, wow, that is really impressive, surely everybody else has to be impressed too, right? But no, they were not. Now, that's partly for 2 reasons, with neither of those reasons being particularly good. But the first one being that somehow, despite awesome performances in his first 5 years, he was always getting just slightly overshadowed by another player. Like, one random punter would always have some record-breaking year, while he was just being a consistent, high-level guy. Like, as a true freshman, there were only 4 guys who outperformed him. It was the drafted Johnny Townsend, drafted Michael Dixon, current Browns punter Corey Bojorquez, and a guy who would get some NFL looks in Trevor Daniel. In 2018, he would do even better than the previous year, averaging 48.3 yards per punt, which would have led the nation the year prior, but future draft pick Braden Mann was having the best year of his career, averaging 51, so he would be outshined again. While 2019 would be a down year with him only being top 10 in the nation, and 2020 would be a weird COVID year in general, 2021 he would look to outdo himself, averaging this time 50.9 yards per punt, which normally would have made a lot of buzz, except there was this guy named Matt Ariza who would average 51.2 yards per punt, and Michael Turk, who many know as Hang Time, who averaged 50.9 yards as well, to really dilute the capstone year in an already impressive career. And while sure, maybe he never got his shine, but surely NFL coaches wouldn't be so caught up in the hype to miss out on a surefire solid punter, right? I mean, he was directionally sound, consistent not just ball to ball, but season to season, and even thrived in the rough circumstances he was in, like being forced to do sort of a half rollout spiral punt, which is pretty hard to be consistent at. But there was another stat that had NFL coaches hung up, and it was his net punt stat. Now, while I like to sweep this away due to the fact that Colorado State was just not in a great place in his years there, so yeah, they struggled to cover punts, but they struggled to do a lot of things, and I think it should have been ignored. But also when talking to other specialist scouts, so many people were caught up with the fact that he was in Colorado, and it was a higher elevation, so of course he should be doing better, despite the fact that no one had ever done what he did in all the years of Colorado punters before him. So with that, he goes completely undrafted, despite, in my opinion, being one of, if not the best punter in the class. And he didn't just not get drafted, but he was also picked up by the Tennessee Titans, who, for what it's worth, had a former All-Pro guy still on their roster. And that's a guy that people thought had a lot of years left in him in Brett Kern. So many many people, myself included, didn't think this was going to be the last stop for Stonehouse, as he would now have to do so much better than Kern to usurp him at Tennessee. But Ryan made it through minicamp, then made it through the other camps, and in his first NFL punt in the preseason, he drops a snap, that's it, never played again. Just kidding, this mother picks it up and runs for a first down. On top of that, he balled out for the rest of preseason, and to many people's dismay, Stonehouse got the job, and the beloved Kern was sent off to greener pastures, no pun intended, because he'd eventually end up on the Eagles. But what no one was expecting, except for me who kept ringing the bell on how good Ryan was, is what would happen next, which is with all that pent-up aggression from being doubted, he would take it out on some poor footballs. I'm talking about year one, he would average 53.1 yards per punt, shattering, destroying, dismantling the 80-year record set by a guy who was punting when returners simply did not exist in Sandy Baugh. And yeah, he would give up some return yards, but the thing is, when you're kicking the ball that far, you can afford to give up some return yards and still get some great results, being the #1 punter in gross yards of all time and being #4 in net yards that year. And I wish I could tell you he stopped there, but he had a point to prove. So year two, he would do the same thing. 12 games in, and he was averaging 53.1 yards again, meaning that he not only had the highest NFL gross punt of all time, but had it twice, this time with an even better net punt stat, now sitting at #3 this year. As to anybody with eyes, you were starting to realize that this was a generational talent that they had, and he had no sign of slowing down until the unthinkable happened. In a game against the Colts, they would let somebody through scot-free and get a punt blocked, and then later that game, somebody comes in off the edge, once again not blocked at all, and this time doesn't just block his punt, but injures Ryan in a gruesome way. Now, while it might be hard to imagine coming back from a severe injury like this, there was also the mental aspect of having to get over the fear of something like this happening again, since it was so out of his control. But to make matters worse, when he comes back, the Titans special teams has just withered away. Blocking had gotten even worse, leading to even more punts getting blocked this year. And the worst part is, as you watched Ryan in the back half of the season, he was in pure damage control mode. He had sped his operation up to the absolute upper limits of what you could expect a human to do, taking about 1.0 seconds to get the ball out of his hands and kick it, which is about 25% faster than the industry standard of 1.3 seconds. This limited the block punts in the back half of the season, and impressively, he was still averaging over 50 yards a punt. But with the new insane added speed, it made it a lot harder to control direction and hang time, as well as the blocks from earlier this year adding on. His net yardage was way down from seasons past. And while anybody could imagine that all you would say to this is that, well, just get some better blocking for him and get him back to his regular rhythm and you can have one of the best punters, it appears that he became the scapegoat for somebody, as in the offseason, he was released. That's right, the punter who was averaging across his first 3 seasons 0.8 yards more than the previous single season high record, which stood for over 80 yards, and despite having a down year for net punt, was still a career top 10 best net punt of all time, was released. And now I have no idea how to even make a comparison like this to show how insane it would be. It's something like the Bengals releasing Joe Burrow, or the Bills releasing Josh Allen in his first 3 years. And while yeah, these guys were under different contracts, making it a bit different, the premise is that a guy was coming off an unprecedentedly high level of performance and being released, and I cannot imagine this happening to anybody else. And along with his history being disrespected by teams, I can't imagine what he's going through. Good news is though, is that the Dolphins picked him up. I'd imagine he's going to do even better down in Miami, but I just don't think there will ever be a more disrespected player in any sport than Ryan Stonehouse.